Whether or not it was selfish and wrong, Weiss felt a little more pleased than she cared to admit for how the day had gone. The chance to spend time with her team was one thing, as it was to see Jaune's face when they surprised him with his family. The real kicker, however, had to be what almost any other person might have called a date and a chance to meet the parents. Maybe it wasn't for them, since he turned her down, but it still felt like it. She also knew Jaune's mother considered it one as well, if the regular looks she received were any indication. Juniper Ark approved of her as her son's potential partner, even if she never said it out loud. That meant a lot to her, more than it ought to have. Ashni did not need the approval of other people. Ashni did what they wanted, how they wanted, and if they wanted it bad enough, they'd do something to make it happen. Her father would have been disgusted, not only at her choice of a love interest, but also the manner of which she pursued it. She was not her father though. She never would be, and for that, she counted herself thankful. Still, she wasn't above showing off a little, even if it was a habit she knew she ought to curb. Here, though, a little generosity was both natural and well received. "I'll pay for the meal," she said, laughing off Juniper's protest. "Really, it's no problem. You and your family supported us out in Vale, both with food and a room to stay." Weiss smiled at the memory. "Please, let me repay this, even if it's just a little bit." They knew who she was, of course. That was probably the only reason they accepted, even if it was reluctantly. They were good people. Jaune was lucky to have parents like them. Weiss drew her card with a flourish and offered it to the man behind the counter. She nearly died when it was rejected. "This has to be a mistake," she laughed, acutely aware of Jaune's parents behind her. She took the card back and cleaned it on her wrist, holding it back to the gentleman behind the counter. "Could you try it again?" "Of course, just give me a second." The elderly man smiled and tried it again. When it failed, he checked his machine, polished the card, and tried a third time. Weiss felt her stomach fall out when it failed again. "Is there a problem, Weiss?" Juniper asked. She smiled kindly. "Maybe it's a computer error. Let us handle the bill for this. It's fine." It was a mercy offering, Weiss knew. Both of Jaune's parents were pretending they believed that, giving her an out she could take instead of admitting her embarrassment. Her eyes scrunched shut as she swallowed her humiliation and made to accept. Jaune beat her to it. "Let me see that," he said, taking the card from the man. He brought it against his wrist and scuffed it against the fabric of his coat. When he handed it back, it was a different color altogether. It was a different card. "There," he said. "There was something stuck on the back of it. Maybe that'll fix it." The shopkeeper noticed, of course. He must have understood, for he pulled the card out of sight. "Allow me to try it once more," he said, sliding over to the machine and ringing up the purchase. "There we go, working as intended." Weiss felt relief crash down on her when his parents sat back down. "I guess it was just that," Juniper laughed. "I guess so," the shopkeeper said, handing the card back to her with a wink. She didn't think she'd ever wanted to thank someone more. No, wait. She wanted to thank Jaune the whole time. "I guess it was," she laughed, walking back to their table on shaky legs. She slipped Jaune's card into her skirt, sending him a silent thank you from the side of her mouth. He smiled back. "Thank you for this, Weiss," Juniper said. She reached over to pull Weiss into a quick hug, then leaned her head down by her ear. "For what it's worth," she whispered, "I think my son cares for you more than he lets on." Her heart skipped a beat. She wanted to ask more, but the moment was gone as his mother pulled back with a warm smile and moved over to hug her son. "We'll call it here for now," she said. "I'm not very mobile like this. I think it's time I took a break." "Do you want me to see you back to the hotel?" No, don't be silly. You should spend the rest of the day with your friends. We'll be here every day to see you and watch you compete either way." Juniper pulled back and kissed her son's cheek. "Make sure you do your team proud." I will, Mum. That's good. Juniper smiled, but it quickly switched to a frown as she looked beside her. Well, aren't you going to say something to your son? I was waiting for an opportunity, Nicholas said. I was just a little worried I might be told off for interrupting. Why would I? Are you saying I'm hormonal again? No, dear. The older man stepped forward to give Jaune a quick hug. Juniper watched with a fond smile, but standing beside her partner, Weiss heard the man's whispered words. Help me. Hell no! Jaune hissed. You did this to her. Wear protection next time. I did! It didn't work! Come on, Nikki. Juniper laughed. She grabbed her husband by the arm and dragged him away with more strength than her frame really suggested. Weiss watched them go, amused not only at their byplay, but also how easily and relaxed they were around one another. I wonder if I'll ever have that with someone one day. Her eyes flicked to Jaune beside her, but she knew she didn't have the courage to say anything. Instead, she picked up the white swan he'd won for her and held it against her side. She tried to make the action look casual, even if she would have hunted down anyone who dared try to take it from her. I never realized how weird Mum is when she's pregnant, Jaune said. Sorry about how she acted. It must have been pretty awkward. It didn't feel awkward at all. I actually enjoyed it. Thanks for paying for them anyway. Our family isn't exactly hurt for line, but if Dad hasn't been on any hunts lately, well, looking after so many people isn't cheap. Sapphire, Sable, and Coral do what they can to help, but the rest are still in education. Weiss felt a tiny prickle under her skin. Was he mocking her? You know full well I didn't pay for the meal. She sighed. Her hand fished into her skirt pocket, drawing out her scroll. It didn't take her long to find the reason for the card being rejected. It was detailed in a lovely message from her father after all. I've been cut off from my finances, she said. It felt like she should have been furious at that, but she wasn't. It was a loss, sure, but she couldn't find it in herself to care. She still had her team. Can he do that? Jaune asked. She sighed and put the scroll away. I don't actually have what you call a bank account. The SDC has more money than most banks do, and Father would never pay a middleman just to look after it. Parasites, he would call them. People who fed off the wealth of others without doing any work for it. He set up the SDC to have its own bank, of a sort. The service is only available to employees. Not that many of them trust us enough to use it. Management do, and there are no hidden rates or traps. It's a good offer and a good deal. Except that it gives him control over the accounts. Jaune finished. That's why he can cut you off. Because he doesn't need to contact a bank and customer projections. He just closes your account, or blocks access to it. Weiss nodded. Her father would only do that if he wanted something. If he felt it would serve a purpose. Probably one of forcing her to talk to him. If it were just that. She might have accepted. But she knew it wasn't. He wanted her back in Atlas. Back under his control. Back where she was nothing more than a resource. Forget it, she said, both to him and Jaune. She fished around in her pocket and found the card he used. Here. Thank you for not letting me look like an idiot in front of your parents. I appreciate it and I promise to pay you back however I can. Pay me back for what? He asked. She sighed. The money you used to buy the meal. She poked the card into his arm, and when he made no move to take it from her, Here, she repeated. Jaune smiled. That's not mine. Huh? Weiss pulled it back and looked down at the card, eyes growing wide as she saw the name etched across the front. Miss Weiss Snee. What? She turned it over, inspected the back. It was a perfectly normal card from VCB, the Vale Central Bank. She didn't have an account with them, however. She didn't have an account with any bank. Her eyes shot up to meet his. I don't understand. Well, I didn't want to interrupt your story. Jaune said. "But you did make one mistake. You do have an account with a bank outside your family." He pointed at the card. "How, though? I didn't sign up for this." "Officially, you did. You also transferred quite a lot of funds from your main account into it." Jaune shrugged, but his smile could only be described as smug. "Officially, that is." "No way." "What's the unofficial account?" "Top secret, I'm afraid." She didn't know what to say. Yet again, he did something she couldn't understand, that she couldn't explain. The question of how he managed to fool a bank and set an account up in her name was one example. But how could he have known that it would be necessary was the bigger one. The chances of her father telling Jaune were lower than the moon falling from the sky. She doubted even Winter would have known, otherwise her sister would have assertedly warned her in advance. She gripped her wrist with one hand. "How did you know?" she asked. "How could you possibly have known any of this would happen?" Lucky guess." She squeezed. He sighed. "I'm a time traveler. I've lived this life hundreds of times before, to the point where I know every event as it's about to happen." He turned to face her. "Happy?" Weiss kept her gaze for a good 10 seconds. Eventually, she sighed and rolled her eyes. "If you don't want to tell me, then don't. There's no reason to be such an idiot about it." "But it's true." Jaune laughed. "You never believe me, though." "That always happens." "I bet it does." She sighed. "And maybe you get to sleep with my sister as well." "Yep." She kicked him in the shin for that, and then kicked him again when instead of a pained yelp, she got a loud laughter. He was such an idiot. She kind of liked that about him, even if she wasn't sure why. "Come on." She sighed, taking his hand in hers and dragging him away. "We best find Blake and Yang before they do something stupid. Plus, even though the surprise is over, you did still promise to spend the day with us here." "Yes, dear," he said, still laughing to himself. She dragged him away, to play games, find their team and generally, to have a relaxing day before the fight started. And if he never noticed how she kept hold of his hand, if he never noticed how his fingers curled around hers, well, she wasn't going to complain. While students and visitors alike enjoyed the hospitality of Beacon, its illustrious headmaster wished he could be doing the same, or doing paperwork, or playing chess, or anything really that didn't involve standing out in the hot sun as his old friend's ship slowly settled down. James really did like his entrances. It was part of being respected. He would always say that. Part of intimidating people he likely meant. Still, as the tall man stepped out from his small craft, Osmond couldn't help the small smile that graced his face. "James," he said, stepping forward with his cane in one hand. "It's good to see you." "You as well, old friend," Ironwood said. He was flanked by guards and offered Osmond nothing more than a handshake. He would give no more in public, but there was no malice there. The general had an image to uphold, and Osmond knew the greeting would be more familiar once they were out of the public eye. Already, several photographers were taking shots from the edge of the field. "Would you like to reconvene in my office?" Osmond asked. "Please," James whispered. The two moved away, Ironwood barking some quick orders to his guards, who saluted and left him to help unload the aircraft they arrived in. It was a small thing, which was both a miracle and a relief in itself. He half dreaded the arrival of a battleship. No students crossed their path as they traversed the halls. They were all too busy enjoying themselves. But Ironwood's face remained carved from a rock until they boarded the elevator to his office. Only then did it crack. Relieved to be free of the scrutiny, Osmond asked his old friend that let out a long sigh. "Like you wouldn't believe." James laughed. "Things have been hectic back in Atlas, but don't let this sour the mood. There should be a time for celebration. Indeed, the vital festival ought to bridge the gap between all the nations. I take it you brought your best and brightest to compete? Naturally, old friend. I've heard much talk of yours as well. James sent him a sly look. Specialist Snee was quick to heap praise on her sister's team. And after seeing their record, I've come to realize that's just not family loyalty. Team Jazzberry is a skilled team, Osmond said. They certainly sound it. I must say though, I know. Osmond sighed. The name was a difficult one, I admit. Hindsight makes fools of us all, however. I've been able to come up with names since, but omitting that and changing the team designation would not look professional. I'm sure that led to some strife. I believe the younger Miss Schnee was quite upset by it. I can't imagine why. Osmond looked at Ironwood for a moment, and the general looked back. As the elevator door dinked open and they both walked out, they couldn't help but laugh. It's good to see you again, Osmond repeated. It's really been too long. I couldn't agree more. Ironwood's eyes lit up. Ah, Galinda, a sight for sore eyes. James? And Crow. Ironwood sighed. What? No kind words? The drunken man swayed on his feet. If it helps. You're a sight set to make my eyes feel sore too. Ironwood rolled his eyes and ignored the man as he always did. Rooms have been set up for you and your men, Galinda said. I'll pass the details on your scrolls and the contact details of those you provided in advance. Your students have already been allocated rooms, of course, but should you wish to see them or speak with them, you're free to. Classes are all cancelled until after the tournament. Thank you, Galinda. I think I'll trust in your judgment, however. Ironwood accepted a cup of coffee from the woman and turned back to Osmond. How goes the security? Osmond sighed. He'd known it would come to this. I recalled a number of huntsmen and huntresses back to the city. They've already been allocated locations and zones. Defense around the city itself has been beefed up, while security on the Colosseum is at an all-time high. I see. If you need additional hands, my paladins could. No, James, that won't be necessary, Osmond said. Osmond said, for what felt like the 100th time. Vale has everything in hand, as you know. I believe our recent record speaks for us. Indeed it does. Several White Fang pilots foiled and a terror strike in the heart of the city left without casualties. Ironwood paused. Well, without innocent casualties at any rate. Your response was very rapid. You're to be commended. Beacon is always prepared. But perhaps a little more prepared than usual. No. A certain someone saw fit to brief me on your mysterious friend. This Silver. Bloody Ice Queen. Crow mumbled. Osmond's thoughts weren't much different, but he expected no less from Winter Snee. A contact is one of many advantages we wield, he said. He has been useful in providing us information. However, that cannot be denied. And you've yet to locate him? Crow has encountered him numerous times. On the last, he was injured by one of our students. We feared he might have succumbed to it, but Miss Snee's call proves otherwise. And you didn't think to pursue the matter? Ironwood was clearly annoyed. This mole could hold valuable information on the White Fang and their operations. Locating him should be a priority. Extracting that information even more so. Define extract. Crow interrupted. His red eyes held a dangerous edge. I know you're not saying what I think you're saying. Right, Jimmy? How should I be expected to know what someone like you thinks, Branwyn? Enough, Osmond said. He stepped forward and between them, making it look like he was placing his mug down on the desk. James, while we do desire to find and speak with our contact, the security and safety of the people of Vale and those attending the festival take precedence. I'm sure you can understand. Ironwood nodded. On the other hand, the matter of locating him hasn't stopped. Right now, however, we don't want to push him into hiding until after the tournament is over. If the White Fang wish to make a move, this would be their golden opportunity. Silver has already shown a willingness to betray their cause. If we attempt to capture him, we might distract him or push him into hiding. That might impede his ability to warn us of a potential attack." He sighed and turned back to James. "Once we have the manpower to spare, rest assured, we will do our best to find him and to talk to him," Crow said. "No interrogation, and definitely none of that shit we all know you lot in Atlas pull." Ironwood had a face of thunder, but managed to keep his temper in check. "As you say, Ospen, I'll leave the matter in your hands for now. However, the Schnee Dust Company is a vested ally of the Atlas military. With his daughters here, and with the contact having been in touch with both, he asked me to look into this matter and locate this silver individual." Ironwood pulled out a folder from his pocket. "Naturally, I sought the Council of Vale's permission." "Those stupid fossils!" Crow snapped. "You should—" Ospen interrupted him. "That's fine, James. If you desire so badly to seek him out, then feel free. All I ask is that his questioning is left to the kingdom whose jurisdiction you stand within." "Naturally." Ironwood nodded, seemingly pleased to have won him over. "I should see to the comfort of my men first, though. Galinda, would it be possible to show them to their quarters? I'd love to catch up on the way." "Of course, James. Come with me." Crow waited until they were both out of the room, and the elevator was almost certainly at the bottom, before he turned back to Ospen. "Is it safe to leave him in charge of that? I don't mind saying, I don't want Silver captured by him. The mysterious bugger's grown on me. And you needn't worry, Crow. I don't believe James will think to look in the right places." "The right places? You saying you know where those are?" Crow looked intrigued. "You know more than you're letting on, don't you?" Osmond chuckled. "Perish the thought. Come now. I'd like to hear how the training of your niece's team is going. Will they be able to make an impact at the tournament?" "My niece's team?" Crow challenged. "Or a particular member of it?" Osmond didn't answer. He didn't have to.